Good morning, everybody. It's Mr. Ashley. Today we're going to be talking about colonial government. Now, you may recall in previous classes we've talked a little bit about colonial government. We talked about proprietary governments, charter colonies, and also royal colonies. And we're going to cover that just a little bit today, but we're going to talk about how ideas of colonists are going to start to grow and how they're going to start to see themselves as a more independent group of people. And how these ideas kind of lead towards the revolution a little bit. So let's take a look here at our first page, and we'll talk about England's influence here. So these people basically all come from England in some way, shape, or form. All 13 colonies are English colonies by the end of, at least by the 1700s to 1600, late 1600s. So they have already got that English influence, and most people in the colonies are English. You got Dutch and German people and French people scattered around, but for the most part they are British. So they get these ideas from the way people live in England. One of those ideas here is from a document called the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta was a piece of legislation that was passed in the 1200s, which basically said that the people have certain civil liberties. They have certain rights that they're entitled to that the government cannot, infringe upon at all, or most of the time. One of those civil liberties that we practice today still is the freedom of speech. So basically, these people were upset that the king was stepping on their basic human rights, or their rights to be free and living people, and so they created this law to limit the power of the king. The next thing that they do is they end up having a representative government in England. They call this their parliament. In the United States, we call it our Congress. And a representative government essentially is, I don't have time personally to write laws, to vote on everything, so why don't we vote for people that can do that? We'll vote for people whose job it is to create our laws and to govern us. And so they create this representative government, and it's supposed to work hand in hand with the king. And then the final thing here that they're going to do in England is they're going to create an English Bill of Rights. And essentially, the English Bill of Rights protects the laws that are created by the people. It protects those laws that are created by their parliament. Basically saying, if the king wants to change anything, he has to go through parliament first. So if the king has some sort of an issue with a law or a tax or something that was created by the representative government, by the parliament, he's got to ask parliament first, and they have to agree that this needs to be changed. So imagine yourself as a colonist now. You lived in England at some point, or you're from England, and you identify as English, and you look at these three different things. I have civil liberties. I have rights that the king and the government cannot infringe upon. We should have a representative government. We should have some sort of seat at the table, which colonists did not have. Only British people, only people in England actually had representation in this government. If you were a colonist, you didn't get to vote on someone to be in parliament. So that right there is going to upset them. And then the final thing here is, these laws that Parliament is going to make don't always apply in the colonies. The king has a lot of power over the colonies, and the people in the colonies don't really like that. So they're going to take this influence. They're going to take these ideas that they've already lived with for many years before coming to the colonies, and they're going to sort of use them to build on this idea that they should be a free people to govern themselves. So let's take a look real quickly at what these governments are that they have currently in the colonies and why they might not exactly be, the best for them. So you have charter colonies, which are run by the colonists. Sometimes they're run by an organization or a business. And these charter colonies, for the most part, they're going to offer colonists the most influence over the government that's going to lead them in the colonies. Then you have proprietary colonies, which the parliament or the king is going to decide to sell, certain parts of land to business owners, to own, to groups of people or individual people to own for themselves. Oftentimes, these proprietary governments would allow for some sort of a representative government, but a lot of times they also wanted to just appoint people that they liked or that were in their in crowd. And then finally, you have the royal colonies, which are parliament approved, and they have some sort of influence from the royal government as well. So the king and the parliament are going to agree on people to lead these colonies, and they're going to be run directly by them. None of these types of governments really gives colonists 100% control to make their own laws and to govern themselves, and that's where the problem's going to be. If you believe in the Magna Carta and you believe that you have individual rights and you believe in representative government, that you should be able to choose the people who lead you, and you believe in the Bill of Rights, the English Bill of Rights, that says that the king can't dictate everything that we do and can't change our laws, then you're not necessarily going to like how these three types of governments are set up against you. The next thing we're going to talk about here is the rise of local governments in the colonies. Think of these local governments as your town hall meetings or your Board of Education meetings and your town council meetings. This is a place where people can come to air their grievances. If I have an issue going on with my hometown, I can go to these town hall meetings and I can say, I don't like how you're spending the money on, pencils, right? You're spending too much money on pencils, and I don't personally like that. I can talk about that all day if I want. These town hall meetings gave the colonists a sense of power over themselves. They stopped looking so much at controlling the colony. I don't need to control Connecticut. I just need to control my town. If I can control my town, then I have some sort of power of my own life. And the other issue that's going to really allow these colonists to do that is this idea of salutary neglect. Salutary neglect is when it's a British policy that allows American colonists to govern themselves. Essentially, the British, the Parliament, the King did not care about who ran the government in the colonies, so long as the colonists were staying out of trouble. So as long as, say, the people of Connecticut weren't starting wars with, the French or the Spanish or doing that kind of stuff, where England has to get involved and they have to spend a lot of money, they don't care what we're doing. So we'll talk about how that kind of ends up biting them in the butt a little later on down the road. But for right now, salutary neglect runs throughout the colonies. While they are run proprietary colonies and charter colonies and royal colonies, salutary neglect is going to really allow the colonists to run themselves, especially in their local areas, especially in their towns. And the final thing we're going to talk about today is English economic policies. So in England, they had this economic policy called mercantilism. It's an idea that you want to accrue the most wealth. You want to become a wealthy nation. And how do you become a wealthy nation? How do you save up money? You sell goods. You export more than you import. Exporting is when you take goods from your area and you sell them in a market to other people, and you take the money, and that's your money now. You don't want to import as much, so you want to create your own goods. I don't want to have to, buy, all sorts of different food from one area, because then I'm importing more than I'm exporting. I'm bringing more into my country than I'm selling. I'm buying more than I'm selling. So England is a country that believes in mercantilism. They believe in selling goods, and they see the colonies as the perfect opportunity to do this. The colonies, as we've already talked about, have a lot of resources. They have cash crops like tobacco and indigo and sugarcane and, all these different types of cash crops that they can take, bring over to Europe, and sell in European markets. When they sell them in these European markets, they're going to make a ton of money, and they don't have to worry about importing. The other thing that they can do with the American colonies is they can tell them that they can only buy from England. And that actually comes from the Navigation Acts. So England ends up passing these laws called the Navigation Acts, which controls the American colonies' trades. Tells the American colonists who they can buy from and who they can't buy from. And let's say, like, I was an American colonist. Let's say I really liked ships built in France. So I go and I buy a ship built in France. In order for me to buy this ship, I can't deal directly with France. I have to deal with England first. So England will buy the ship for me, and then I have to pay England for the ship and for the tax that they're going to add on to make their money. Then I can buy it. So obviously the colonists are not going to be all that happy with that. They don't like the fact that they can't just freely choose who to buy from. They want to be able to, choose who to buy and who to sell from. They are going to like the fact, however, that they have a market already open to sell to. All their goods and services that they're offering, all that cash crops and all that lumber that they're going to be cutting down in the colonies is going to be sold directly to England. So you've already got a buyer lined up. They kind of like that until, these small town hall governments, these local governments decided we could be making a lot of money too. We could be practicing mercantilism. We could be growing and growing and growing just like England is. And how would we do that? We need to have a free market. We have to be able to sell to other people and set our own prices. England can't set our prices. So one thing that they're going to do here is the colonists are going to get very upset with the Navigation Acts, and they're going to look at smuggling. They're going to look at illegal trading in order to deal with other countries that they want to deal with, like France or Spain or Portugal or whatever. If you want to buy from them, you got to figure out a sneaky way to do it. And this is kind of setting the grounds here for an American Revolution. It's setting the grounds. We've already talked about some ways that the colonists have been oppressed, that they're not allowed to govern themselves fully, that they're not allowed to, sell to the markets that they want to sell to. They're not allowed to buy from the countries that they want to buy from. They're very controlled here, and at the same time, we see that there is pushback. We see that they've already started, creating their own small town governments to run themselves. They've already started to disobey these laws, and we're going to see over time how this all leads to the American Revolution. But for now, I want you guys to have a good rest of your day. Enjoy yourselves, and hopefully we'll see you back in class real soon. Goodbye, guys.